You woke up one day in a world where you felt different. And so you labeled yourself as the ugly duckling amongst other little yellow, cute, fluffy ducklings. Because you looked different, you acted different, you were what you were. And then one day you finally met your swan people and you realized that all along you were just a beautiful swan, but you were comparing yourself to something else. The metaphor just stuck to me and worked with me and I loved it. And now swans are a little bit of a symbol for me to remind myself that it's okay to be who you are.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of The Conscious Capitalists with myself, Timothy Henry, and my partner in making the world a better place through business, Raj Sisodia. Hey there, Raj.
Hey, Timothy. Hello again.
And this week, we have a special guest and a special member of our Conscious Capitalism community who's also a board member at Conscious Capitalism, Ashli Blumenfeld, who is the co-president of Standard Meat Company, a role she's had with her brother since 2019. Now, prior to that, she spent a good deal of time in New York working in PR in the fashion industry. So it would be a good backstory of how she went from that world into the world of her family business. They're a fourth generation family business. In addition, Ashli serves on the boards of Syracuse Food Group, Martha Stewart Kitchen, the Toronto Area Food Bank, Cook Children's Medical Center, the Fort Worth Zoo, and the Fort Worth Symphony Orchestra. Amidst all of that, Ashli, thank you for taking the time for joining us today. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, we're thrilled to have you today. And I love the little thing you shared with us before we started, which I just want to bring back the words of wisdom of your 12-year-old.
That's right. He is something, right? I was feeling a little nervous this morning, getting ready for the podcast. And he said, Mom, didn't they invite you to be on the show? And I said, yeah. He said, well, then why would you be nervous? They obviously want you to be there. It's like,
Yes.
You know what? Well said, buddy. Well said.
Yeah. Obviously, we want you to be here and we're thrilled. So thank you so much for joining us today. And
Thank
what
you.
would be really helpful maybe is just to begin a little bit about the background of Standard Meat Company. Who is this organization and how long has it been around? A little bit of a story of it.
So we are based in Fort Worth, Texas, and my brother Ben and I are the fourth generation to run our family business. It was founded by our great-grandfather in 1935, and originally it was really a red meat processing facility. So basically, going into the Fort Worth stockyards, buying your side of beef, aging it and cutting it into steaks and selling pretty regionalized restaurants and institutions. And as it grew, we really evolved and changed with the meat industry. My grandfather's sort of claim to fame was partnering with Norman Brinker, who was some refer to as the father of casual dining. He's the one behind Finnegan's and Chili's and a bunch of chains that everybody ate at in all of the 90s and still do today. And that business or that partnership really changed us from a regionalized steak cutter into a larger international distributor of protein products. We actually sold the original Standard Meat in 1983. My grandfather had a heart attack, was worried about family planning and just making sure everybody was well if something was to happen to him. So the original Standard Meat was sold to Consolidated Foods, which later became Sara Lee Corporation. And there was a bit of a hiatus in our 90-year history, about 10 years roughly, before some friends from the food industry came to my dad and basically said, hey, we're starting this new little restaurant concept. It's called Outback Steakhouse. Do you want to go back into the steak business? That's sort of the fun, short story. But we went back into the business in the mid-90s. And luckily, they did sell our family business back to us. And that was in 2019. And that is actually when my brother and I started truly working for Standard Meat. I had started my food career in 2008 with another company we had started called CTI Foods that was in a number of other food items. But our real beginning at Standard Meat as adults, getting paid was only in 2019. And, coming in as brother, sister, deciding to be co-presidents, having your dad be the chairman of the company was, a big risk. I think we had a lot of pressure that we put on ourselves, really not so much by our dad. But it's been a really interesting experience. I mean, I wouldn't trade it for the world. I feel like Ben and I are super lucky that we're kind of a yin and a yang situation where he's really, really good at certain things, like finance and being super thoughtful and rational and intentional. And I'm really good at other things, which is typically more people driven and customer driven. And I'm a little bit more impulsive, a little more gut driven. So when you put us together, we like to say we make one really good CEO. And we have a lot of fun working together. It has been a crazy adventure. When we took over, we had 2 facilities based in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We are now at 5 facilities. We went from 350 employees in 2019 to now over 1,200. And we just opened our largest facility yet. It's 185,000 square feet here in the Fort Worth Stockyards, which is pretty cool because it's kind of we're back to where we started, if you will. The first Standard Meat facility was only a few miles from here. We're in the heart of sort of where the meat business started in Fort Worth, but we've evolved so much in what our capabilities are. And this new facility is really giving us a great platform to do things that our customers are asking for now, more ready to eat items. And it's really great because what it allows us to do for our partners, our customers, is that, and our customers are mostly large multi-unit restaurant chains. We work with people like Chipotle and Shake Shack and a ton of others as well. We still do 100% of Outback's business since we started with them back when my dad restarted Standard Meat. Everything we do is fully custom. So some of our partners need, a perfectly aged and cut steak that they're going to grill back a house. And other people need something that's fully cooked. And it just needs to sort of be scratch made back of house. And a lot of that has to do with just quality of labor, size of your footprint, food safety concerns, what you're trying to execute. And what I love about what we do is we pretty much, we're very, very partnership driven, relationship driven. We really don't stand up as the transactional partner or the commodity partner because it's just not who we are. We're not great at that. We'd much rather find out what problems you're experiencing, what are your challenges, and then we come in and help you figure out how to solve those challenges. And it's made beautiful partnerships over the years and allows our customers to be so much more to us than just a customer, right? We feel so strongly that neither of us can succeed without each other. And so what does that mean? We both, have to do well enough to take care of our people and our own customers. And so we find that if we can really deliver for them, they can really deliver for their customers. So it's a unique space. There's not a lot of people like us unless you're really big, like the Tysons or the Cargills of the world. But us in this sort of family-owned space, we're not, we're a mid-sized business. We're close to $1 billion in revenue, but comparatively, we're quite small, right?
Yeah.
But super, culturally driven, relationship driven.
I love the fact that you're relationship driven and not transactional in nature. And what I'm always curious about is where did that come from, Ashli? I mean, where did that approach evolve for you and Ben that you sort of said, yeah, that's how we're going to run this business, and we think that's critical to our success?
The one thing that I don't think has evolved terribly since 1935 has been just that, right? That we are very relationship driven, right? I think that my great grandfather learned early on that having a good relationship with your customers and being in this in a collaborative way, and then also, treating your employees sort of in that same manner. And really by doing that, there's just so much opportunity for success, right? And I think each generation took that concept without even realizing it was a concept, right? It was just sort of the way we did business, and saw the importance of it and then built off of it. And just, created different, really the products that we've produced, the way we produce them, our facilities, that's changed pretty dramatically in 90 years. But the way we do business is really pretty much just the same.
I love that. And one of the things that you have is a people first culture.
Very much so.
So tell us a little bit about what that means to you of, articulating it as a people first culture.
It's funny, Timothy, when Ben and I ended up at the CEO Summit, the Conscious Capitalism CEO Summit, 3 years ago, we had never heard of Conscious Capitalism. I had not even read the book, right? We had a friend that told us we should go, so we went. And we're sitting there and we're listening to all these different speakers, talk about what it means to be conscious capitalists in their industry or just in general. And Ben and I looked at each other and we were like, oh my gosh, I think that Standard Meat is a conscious company. I think we're conscious leaders. And we didn't even know, right? Because for us, like I was saying, the generational importance of putting our people first has just been sort of our way of doing business for all these years. But, a part of it for me, I think, is it just feels so much better when you're taking care of everyone else around you, right? I mean, I don't think that any of us ever really thought, I'm sure it occurred to us at some point, there is an ROI opportunity when you take care of your people. But for us, it's, care is just who we are, right? We are high integrity people that care a lot. And our employees have always felt like our family, and our partners have always been so important to the sustainability of the company that caring about them was second nature as well. And so I think this concept of a people first culture is just sort of who Standard Meat is, right? I don't think that we necessarily knew that's who we were. And coming into conscious capitalism definitely has given us some new language. We'd never heard of the stakeholder concept. And we were like, wow, I mean, that's just what we already do, right? We've always been very, very philanthropic. I think that was something that was set by our, great grandparents and grandparents as well. And maybe that goes back to our culture of being Jewish immigrants in America and what it meant to give back to our communities. But Fort Worth has been a very important community to us. And I think that's just been a natural stakeholder, and then all the rest. So we were like, wow, looks like we're pretty conscious.
Yeah.
Or at least and now we can just be even more conscious about being conscious.
Yeah. So as you think about, what defines you as a people first culture, what are 2 or 3 things that you think are sort of cornerstone pieces of that puzzle for you folks?
I think first and foremost has been this, what we call culture, right? When Ben and I started 6 years ago, we talked so much about culture, and then we were unable to articulate it, right? Because it was a feeling. It was something you felt when you came into Standard Meat. From our manufacturing facilities to our headquarters, there was just a feeling you got when you were amongst our people. And we found it very important, if we wanted to grow the business as we did, we found that it was really important that we articulate that feeling, right? So we spent a lot of time in that first couple of years writing our purpose statement, which is to inspire the connections and breakthroughs that ultimately feed our life. And it means so much, right? There's so much to unpack in that statement. Standard Meat is not Ben or me or our family. It's really a container that brings all these people together. And in that space, we create these incredible connections with both our employees, our partners, our suppliers, and we truly come together and create breakthroughs. And I think some of that is just driven by that we like to do hard things. We like to find solutions where most people see dead ends. There's just something really fun about doing that work, and then doing it with other people is just incredible. And then we quite literally feed people, right? So we're a food manufacturing company, but then I think that work is soul feeding. So for us, I think protecting our culture became super important to us to enable our growth in the way that we wanted to grow, and to make sure that that culture was sustainable. I think putting those words behind it have really helped us.
So to make sure I got this right, your purpose is to inspire the connections and breakthroughs that ultimately feed our life.
That's right.
So you said there's a lot to unpack there. Unpack it a little bit for us, Ashli.
I think that, again, it really is the connections piece has been foundational for us since the beginning. Right. And so it's how do you build those connections and make them deep and real? And a lot of that comes down to just being authentic people that care deeply for those around us, right? And so the relationships we've been able to build with our employees, where I think that they fully understand that they're part of something much greater than themselves, that they're a part of a greater purpose, that, we're putting food on people's tables, in a number of different ways, I think feels very important, right? So building a connection around that has been just been a big part of who we are. And then I think that, being able to bring us together in a space that's inspirational and where big ideas can be sparked has really led to some incredible breakthroughs. And that means a lot of different things for us. I mean, some of it is just having an amazing culture, right? Or being a conscious capitalist organization. Or sometimes the breakthroughs are really innovative new processing methods or equipment, repurposed in a different way that no one else had thought of doing before, right? Our team is super creative. We've got an amazing group of, classically trained chefs mixed with some, hardcore meat scientists that have ag backgrounds. And it's incredible when you bring different skill sets together, what you're able to come up with. And I think all of that purpose really does make us feel fed.
So Ashli, one of the interesting things among many of your story is just your degree of, or your level of self-awareness and kind of the journey that you've been on and your transparency and vulnerability. And I think I read somewhere that in your early 40s, you kind of had a midlife crisis moment where you described experiencing a deep sense of what the hell is next.
That's right.
So was that, because I've experienced it, I've gone through that midlife moment, where it really is a questioning of the way things are, and is that the rest of the life going to be just like that, or is there something deeper? So what catalyzed that, other than reaching that threshold of midlife? What catalyzed that shift into reflection and vulnerability? And was there a particular moment or a book or a teacher or something that happened?
I was introduced by a dear friend of mine to Rand Stagen in 2019. And I started his integral leadership program at the Stagen Leadership Academy and really thought I was going in there to just grow as a leader and learn more. Ben and I both never got around to getting our MBAs. We sort of felt like we constantly feel like we need to grow and learn. And we wanted to make sure we were doing that as we took on these big roles as presidents of Standard Meat. And I got in there and I started finding that there was a lot of deep personal, introspective work that I didn't expect. And so when that year-long program was up, I talked to Rand and I was like, something feels like it's drawing me to I need more growth. I need something else. And he introduced me to his advanced leadership program, which is actually called the Dragon's Gap. Mm-hmm. And the idea behind it is back in the map making days, I guess cartographers would paint pictures of dragons in areas where the waters had been unexplored, kind of to say, hey, beware. It may be fine there, but it may not. So be careful. That's basically what the program asks of you. It's like, don't avoid the dragons, actually go to them and dig down into them and try to figure out where that is coming from and what it is about you and learn and grow from that. And I don't know that I even knew what I was getting myself into. Actually, I know I didn't know, but the type of coaching work and sort of group work that we did in that space allowed me to really dig in and ask myself some hard questions. And one of the things I realized was that, for years I was following in my parents' footsteps, right? I had set goals for myself that I was following their map, if you will. I wanted to get married by a certain age and have kids and do this and have this kind of career. And then, one day I kind of found myself in one of those classes thinking to myself, well, shit, what's next, right? I've done all the things. I've reached all the steps I set for myself. What do I do? And I felt like I all of a sudden didn't really have anyone to follow. And so I had to then figure out how to lead myself. And I think in order to do that, I really needed to be more self-aware and better understand what I really wanted and not what other people wanted for me. I was like an extreme perfectionist. I felt really strongly about making my parents proud and being successful was super important to me. And I think also, taking over a family business, you can feel like such an imposter, right? Because a lot of people for sure look at you and say, oh yeah, your dad did really great things and he handed you the business and now you're just saying you're doing things, right? And that was the story in my head for so long, that I was really obsessed with doing things extra well. So everyone was like, oh, maybe she isn't just whatever, hereby, with white gloves handed to her. And so I had to, be willing to see what it felt like to not be perfect all the time. Right. And what would happen if I took off some of that armor and I was a little more transparent? And what if people did think I was a lot or too much or too loud or too this or that, what if people did realize that I wasn't smart, which I've now realized I think I am actually smart, but I wouldn't give myself that credit for a very long time. So it just has been a very deep and sort of dark and hard journey, because you have to ask yourself such hard questions. And do a lot of really hard work. And for a long time, I was like, where's the light at the end of the tunnel? Like, hello, you all told me it was going to come at one point and it's not here. And then one day it did start to like show up a little bit. And then I had a little more faith that I could keep going. And now I know there's no finish line, which is kind of depressing, right? I kind of thought I was going to get a gold medal at the end of this work with Rand and his team. And it's not the case. Looks like now I'll be practicing forever to get better.
It's a never-ending journey of there's no limit to consciousness and growth, right?
Apparently, that's what I'm getting now.
But you use the metaphor, and we talk about you have to know yourself and love yourself and be yourself, right? To be an authentic human being and a leader. And you've talked about that story of the swan and the ugly duckling.
Yes.
Right. And at some point you realized. So talk to us about that. What was that realization about? And did that come through coaching? Did you work with the coach after the Stegan Academy?
Yeah, actually, it was within Stegan. I had a coach who was really great at advising on, the professional side of my growth, but then also like very deep on the personal side as like a life coach, if you will. And one day he said to me, he like referenced the ugly duckling, right? And used the metaphor. And I didn't ask enough questions probably at the time of what he actually meant. And so I went home and I actually like pulled out the Ugly Duckling book and read it with my kids. And at the end of it, I was like, dude, you got to explain to me where you're going with this, because I actually don't know that was a compliment. Like, you're telling me I'm the ugly duckling. Like, what am I missing? Which clearly I was missing a lot of the symbolism at the time. But he said, you were, you woke up one day in a world where you felt different. And so you labeled yourself as the ugly duckling amongst other little yellow, cute, fluffy ducklings. Because you looked different, you acted different, you were what you were. And then one day you finally met your swan people and you realized that all along you were just a beautiful swan, but you were comparing yourself to something else, right? And so it was like such a beautiful realization to me that like all along I've probably been something great and I had just been really tough on myself and mean to myself, all that while. And so in the end, it was a pretty beautiful, all of it coming together in a way where the metaphor just stuck to me and worked with me and I loved it. And, now swans are a little bit of a symbol for me to remind myself that it's okay to be who you are.
Yeah. And I think, we already met your wise 12-year-old, but you talked about the more work that you do on yourself, the more you can show up in a way that has a positive impact. I think you used another word, but that has a positive impact on your kids, right? That you said we don't totally just mess them up. And I think as parents, we can all relate to that. But I think that's the beauty of this kind of work is it's not just about what happens in the office. It's about what happens in life.
That's right.
So,
it's all of it, right?
Talk a little more about that. How has parenthood shaped how you lead, and how has leading shaped how you parent? What's kind of because there's some pretty strong parallels between good leadership and good parenting.
Absolutely. And I got to be honest, like when we stepped into these roles of co-presidents, I don't think either of us realized how much it was like being a parent, right? To all these people, right? There's a real similarity there in a lot of different ways. Just the people side of the business was much more complex than I think I had ever given it credit until I was in this role. And so, on the parenting side, I think, as I was doing this deep work on myself, and I was trying to believe what my coaches were telling me, right? That I was smart and I was hardworking and I was all these things, and that it was okay to be confident. You could be confident and humble at the same time, right? And I wanted to believe them so badly, but I was really struggling to believe them. I felt for so long that the coaches were basically getting paid to tell me things like that, right? So how could I really believe them, which is ridiculous, I know, but that's sort of where I was at, right? And one day I found myself actually talking to my daughter, who's now 14, and, middle school and girls is not easy. I don't know if you guys have daughters, but it's a wild ride. And my daughter was having a moment and I was trying to give her good advice and telling her to, give herself some grace. And, she's so intelligent and thoughtful and kind. And I'm telling her all these things that are very true and I know it deeply, right? And then I was like, oh my gosh, I am being such a hypocrite here, right? Like I can't believe that about myself, but I can tell her to believe it about herself. And I think that's what gave me a little bit like extra motivation to keep going with some of that coaching work when it started feeling a little bit like, when's the big revelation going to happen? Because I just realized like how important it was for me to believe in myself if I was going to ask that of her, right? Because I do think there's something to be said for like really walking the talk. And I think that being an example just by being yourself is like the best way to teach, right? Because otherwise it can feel so empty and inauthentic. And I think that's where the parallel really comes in on the, professional side, right? You say all these things that you want for your team, you want growth, you want development, you want them to work on themselves because we all believe that, the better we can become as humans, the better we will be as leaders. And I really strongly believe that. But the only way I can really encourage that out of my team is if I'm walking that same walk. And be willing to be vulnerable, right? So, going back to that vulnerability that you mentioned earlier, Raj, it's like, if I was so afraid to show up as myself and I was so concerned about being sure that I said the smart thing, right? Or that I was so worried everyone was going to question if I should be there or not, then I wasn't showing up and being vulnerable about who I really was. And then I was not encouraging my team to do the same, which I really believe that like why our team is so great today is because we are so varied. We are so, there's so many different people around the table, right? And in our facilities that we all bring a different expertise. Like none of us can be good at everything, right? I think that's something my dad modeled really well for us is when we were young was just that like he knew the importance of putting the right team of experts around him and then really allowing them to show up and be that expert and then have hard conversations, right, from our varying perspectives. But I think appreciating everyone's lens and everyone's different way of looking at the world and at business and life has made us a much better company. And it's definitely made Ben and I better leaders, right? But I think to be willing to do that, you have to be comfortable with who you are, which has been a lifelong struggle for me for whatever reason.
You are part of a long legacy of strong female leadership, and I don't want to move away from that. I mean, it is different being a woman leader and stepping into that fully, and
especially in the meat business, I must say, Timothy.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. And how has that played out for you? How has that element also been a part of this journey?
Well, a cool part of that story is actually so I didn't touch on this when I was giving the history, but in the 60s, our family almost went bankrupt. We had a lot of financial pressures that came from acquiring a business that wasn't really functioning great and did not function well within Standard Meat Company. So we literally almost went bankrupt. My grandfather refused to declare bankruptcy, borrowed money from friends to stay afloat. A bunch of different things. There was a 5 to 6 year period that was very, very bad for us. And at that time, my grandmother, who was actually a Jewish lady from New Jersey who had never worked a day in her life, she was a homemaker and, all of that. She was probably about my age now, so in her mid 40s. And she just showed up and was like, I'm going to work. I'm going to work for Standard Meat. What am I going to do? I don't even care. You tell me. And everyone was like making bets like, oh, Roz is going to make it a week. Like there's no way she can do this. And she ended up retiring after my grandfather and my dad, or I guess retired the same time as my dad from the original Standard Meat. So she ended up having like a 30-year career at Standard Meat Company. And she was a force, like so much energy, brilliant, and so humble and so loving and caring. And I had the luxury of knowing her and loving her until recently. She just passed away at 99 and a half about 2 years ago, right? So I had this incredibly long relationship with her, and she just taught me so much about leadership and what it meant to be a leader in both business, right? Even though I didn't get to experience her that much within the business, I heard so many stories from her and everyone else. She was a great storyteller. And then she became an amazing community leader in her older years, and just a really strong philanthropist. And there's people today that laugh, when we tell stories about her of like, if Roz was calling, you knew you just were going to say yes. Like, it didn't matter what cause she was raising for, you were going to answer the phone and say, whatever you need, Roz. Because you couldn't say no to her. So anyway, she's an idol of mine. I hope one day I have the luxury of, leaving behind a legacy like she's left behind. So that's been really special.
And then continue with your mom then. So the next great woman.
Yes. And my mom as well. So my mom never worked directly in the family business. But she was, a very driven community leader. She started an organization in Fort Worth that now everyone is familiar with, but the Susan G. Komen organization. She opened the chapter here in Tarrant County. That was the group that was really big on raising money for breast cancer awareness, and was very community driven. And the founder of it was actually a lady named Nancy Brinker. And she was married to Norman Brinker, that father of casual dining I mentioned. So there were all these connections sort of on the food world side, and then became a philanthropical force. So, watching her grow that and decide that was where she wanted to put her time and energy was always very inspirational. And then, of course, continuing to be a good mom along the way. I think both my parents, right? Like, it was important to them that they show up for us and be at as much as they could be at for us, in addition to traveling a lot and, growing the business and running a family business. And I think also in both my granddad's day and my dad's day, they did a lot of business with their wives, right? It was more of my mom went to a lot of work events and was always there in a way representing Standard Meat in the family also, not as directly as my grandmother or as me, right? But like really always felt a part of it because of that.
So how does that translate now into, I want to come back to the female leadership part in a heavily male world, but I want to look at that fourth generation and sort of say, you've got a 14-year-old daughter, and what are the things that you think are really important to pass on to her as a leader to help her develop her leadership?
I think something that has been important to me, and I think to our whole family, has been, never pressuring anybody to go into this business, right? Mm-hmm. When you were introducing me, you were telling the story that I was in New York for 5 years working in the fashion industry, right? Because that's what you should do if you ever want to go into the meat business, right? Obviously.
Yes.
But
I was going to say.
Right? That's the resume you want. But, my dad was so wonderful about never pressuring us. He always made it clear that like, if we ever wanted to go into the food business, the opportunity was there for us. But like, I worked for him when I was a kid and all that stuff. But like, I literally was 18 years old, left Fort Worth and said, I'm never coming home. I'm never working for the family business. Because, you're so smart when you're that age. And really, I fell into the business by default because I moved back to Texas after, 5.5 years on Fifth Avenue, and I just didn't know what to do in Fort Worth. There was no fashion opportunities directly in Fort Worth. I didn't want to live in Dallas. So I just went to work for one of our food companies. And the first week was like traumatizing. I went from this beautiful office on Fifth Avenue to like the first day, my receptionist telling me about her ex-husband getting out of jail and she's worried about him and her kids because he's on meth. And I was like, oh my gosh, what's happening? And then a week later, like I fell in love with that receptionist. She like everybody was just so amazing and wonderful and hardworking. And I just fell in love with the business. So I tell that story to just say that for my daughter, I think it's important that she knows that I have no expectations for her to be a part of this business per se. But my hope for her is that she can believe in herself and have confidence while also remaining humble in whatever she chooses to do. Everyone thinks maybe they know what they want to do at a young age, and that can evolve so much. And that's something else I try to really be sure and tell her, because at times she'll be like, I'm so frustrated that like, I don't know what I want to be when I get older, like some of my friends. And I'm like, oh, Eleanor, I don't know what I want to be when I get older. And she's like, oh, Mom, whatever. And I'm like, no, but it's true, because, if I had not started in fashion and then moved into, one division of this and done that and tried to be a stay-at-home mom for a couple years, I wouldn't be the person I am, and I wouldn't be here today in this way. And that's advice I try to give any young person I talk to, is that like, you really don't know your path and you shouldn't know it, right? You gotta trust that you're putting the, one foot in front of the other. You're paying attention. You're asking yourself good questions. You're getting curious about whatever is sparking your interest, and really just be willing to say yes when the time is right. Right. And again, you won't know when the time is right, but you'll have some kind of gut feel that gives you that urge to say yes. And I think that, that's really what I'm trying to teach both my children is, just go with your gut and, keep being like the really wonderful, kind, and caring people that you are. I think empathy and compassion is a hugely important part about being a leader, is really understanding and trying to see where your people are coming from and meet them where they are, and don't have high expectations of them, but don't try to make them into something that they're not, which is the same for children. That's one regret I have in my life, is how hard I've been on myself for so many years.
That's part of the journey. That's why you have the depth that you do now, Ashley. I would have to say that it's very inspiring to hear you. And that generational legacy and your grandmother, my God. I just feel like there's a book there, these three women, okay, great women of Texas, in different ways, leading their lives in different ways, and yet having such a, leaving such a wake behind,
Yeah. And then understanding like that wake and just being super respectful of what that wake means, right?
Yeah. So I want to plant that seed. I hope to see that book someday, either by you or maybe by your daughter. Maybe she ends up writing that book,
Oh, she'd be a great writer. She is a great writer already. So maybe.
So I want to come back more fully to the being a female leader in a male-dominated world.
Sure.
How have you navigated that? I mean, this is a male asking a female that question, but that irony aside,
Yeah.
What has that meant for you, and how has that shaped how you've thought about leadership?
When I first started at Standard Meat, I was very intimidated by that idea that it was super male heavy here at Standard Meat, especially on the leadership side. And then basically everywhere I went on the supply side, it was heavily male at the highest level. And so it took a lot of talking to myself and saying like, you can show up and be self-confident and it's okay. I think some of that anxiety, the imposter syndrome used to make me a little bit overly aggressive as a woman, because I was like, I got to show up in this man's world, right? Like the people that know me well know that I have a really bad mouth. Like I cuss way too much. And I'm sure that some of that was like a defense mechanism on the early days of like being in this, heavily male, like big ag background world. And so I think slowly but surely it was really less about the people that I was coming up against and more about me being okay with who I was and the real version of me, right? Like I said earlier, I don't know if this was on air, but I'm very short and I'm pretty loud. And so I'm this loud, very energetic and passionate Jewish girl in the meat business. And these guys, a lot of them do not know what to do with me because they've never seen anything quite like this. And I've learned like, that's okay. Like, let them relate to me in the way they're going to relate to me and get to know me. And typically once they're willing to get to know me, they start seeing the value that I can bring and how different it is to what they can bring. So rather it be this sort of like me versus you thing, it can be something much more beautiful. But it's taken a lot of I have a lot of self-confidence building, a lot of coaching. It's interesting. I laugh. I collect coaches to some degree. I really like coaching. So I have some really amazing coaches, most of which, believe it or not, I've met through Conscious Capitalism. But for the first time, I have a female coach, and my dynamic with her is very different. I think that I'm comfortable being a strong woman in the male side of things because I can show up in a way, and it's maybe someone once said to me that I had a very masculine way about me, which kind of like the ugly duckling. I was like, is that offensive? Like, I don't know how I should take that. But I think I'm just a strong person, right? And so I'm certainly able to sit at the table, but it's also like getting comfortable. Like, I don't have to be always talking and always loud, and I can dial it down a little and be okay. The longer I've been here, the more diversity I've seen in this industry. Like, we have a really close relationship with a school in College Station, Texas, called Texas A&M University. And the Meat Science School is actually named after my grandfather. And that school is, I don't know if it's 65, 70% young women now versus men in meat science. So it's really cool to see these young people growing up in the industry and being super interested in it. And then similarly on the restaurant side, I'm seeing a lot more women raise up and grow into leadership positions alongside me, right? So there's a lot more diversity than there used to be.
At Southwest Airlines, Herb Kelleher and Colleen Barrett were kind of co-leading that company, right? And Colleen used to come to our conferences and she would say things like, well, Herb is the dad, I'm the mom.
Yeah.
And every family needs a mom and a dad, and every company also needs both those energies you described, yin and yang, and you and your brother. And it doesn't have to be that you carry all the mom energy and he carries all the father. It can be a blend, right? You can bring some of the father energy as well. But I think that vulnerability that you have modeled here and in your leadership, it reminds me of a Mexican leader that I interviewed for my next book. Her name is Marissa Lazo, and she runs a very successful bakery company, with cafes and so forth. And she was always very emotional, and also, again, trying to fit into a male-dominated leadership culture. And she thought she had to hold back her emotions and be kind of the stoic. And then so she said, for 2 years, I practiced not crying in front of my employees because I thought that's what a strong leader should do. But it didn't feel right. I realized I was more focused on holding back tears than on delivering the message. So I stopped pretending. I said, this is me. I cry when I'm moved. That's part of who I am. And from that moment, everything changed. My connection with my people deepened and my leadership became more inspiring. So I think that at this company, Barry Waymiller, when I first went to see them, they jokingly said, we measure our success in man tears.
Oh, I love it.
We got men here willing to cry in front of each other, There's something deep happening, when you do that. And very often we hold back. And we say we have to be professional and put on this mask and armor and build a wall around our hearts and so forth. And that's, I think, the gift of the feminine as well, within men and women, that we can actually be in touch with that. And that's how we connect to people, right? You mentioned the person, that you met when you moved to Fort Worth, right? And how you connected with her because it was at that level, So, yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
And I'll say this too, to that point, Raj, because I've learned so much about myself by getting more comfortable with who I am and being more vulnerable in the workplace, we're trying to build a program at Standard Meat right now, a leadership development program. Stegan is helping us build a custom program inside the company to really help our leaders do that as well, to open up male and female and learn how to just be who they are, be open and honest and vulnerable and, comfortable with the real, like their humanness, right? Which has been, it's something I wish I would have, Ben and I think both feel we wish we would have done it earlier. We were kind of afraid that our team was going to be like off put by the idea of this. And so we waited probably a little longer than we could have to do this inside standard. And since it's, very new right now, and we're on the front side of it, it's just our leadership team that are sort of in a guinea pig stage of growth. And they've been in this program internally for about 4 months. And just the changes we've seen in our team in their willingness to let their guard down, right? Or admit when they don't know something, or be okay when they're wrong, which we've always been a company that's like, we celebrate failure in the sense that like we learn from it and let's move forward. And we really like risk, so we're not afraid of that. But it's like, it's okay. You can be honest about it and be okay with it. And just watching the team give each other credit in a new way, and, just cheer for their cross-functional peers. It's just been such a fun thing to see, and to realize that it doesn't matter what kind of business you're running or what kind of person is predominantly in a leadership role. Like, they all have it in them to be more human and more vulnerable. And it feels really good to be that way and show up as who you are at work. It feels great. And so I'm really excited about where that's going to go as we get to cascade that through the organization.
Well, what I like about this conversation is that it's really deep and vulnerable and real. And at the same time, you run a darn friggin' good business. Like, I want to come back to that. I mean, this is not just the soft stuff on the side.
Right. That's right.
Guys have grown the business significantly in the last 5 years. So tell us a little bit about how you combine those elements, people first, strong on purpose, vulnerable, open leaders. And oh, by the way, we run a damn good business. And so tell us a little bit about the damn good business side of things and that journey.
Yeah. I think that my grandfather always, made it very clear that like, you cannot be successful unless you make money, right? So we are capitalists. We understand the importance of having a strong platform. And you can't be sustainable for 90 years without that strong financial platform, right? Like, you have to make money. With that said, you've got to have integrity around that, right? You've got to make what's right to make, so your customer can pay the right price so they can be successful, right? And, my grandfather always had a saying where he would say that, if your customer had the sniffles, we had pneumonia, right? And what that meant was not that like, if your customer is dying, you're going down with them. It meant that it was on us to take it seriously as if we had pneumonia and go step up and go help them be successful, right? Because we can't succeed without each other. And I think, as we're in this strange time of uncertainty in the world right now where, we are seeing a slowing of traffic at restaurants, right? People are either trading down or they're spending less. Their habits are changing. It's a cycle we've been in before, right? We saw this in 2008. And so in periods like this, what I think we've learned since we have been around a long time is that this is when we need to step up and help our customers be successful. And that might mean taking less margin for a period of time. That might mean not being as innovative around new products. It may be more about focusing our innovation on how are we more efficient and still getting out a really good, high quality product, right? It's coming up with just a different set of solutions for our customers that may need something different in a different environment. And I think that really, that desire to be a partner and the willingness to take a hit when they're taking a hit, what that shows in loyalty and integrity pays back in dividends when things are going well.
What I love about that, Ashley, is, as you know, we're in the conscious capitalism movement. People are always saying, what's the ROI on conscious capitalism? And then you turn around and say, well, because we're relationship focused, because we're people first, because we're purpose driven, we innovate and we pivot and we build these long-term sustainable competitive advantages around this relationship and this culture of innovation. And, you sort of struggle. Well, Ashley, how do you describe the ROI on being that kind of business? And, you tell the stories and it's obvious. Why aren't more people getting that message?
If I didn't have purpose and a reason to get up every day, I would not enjoy my job. right? So I don't want to be successful without purpose, right? Like that just would not be, if we ever ended up there, that would not be a company that I would want to work at or work for. And I think that, that is true for a lot of young people coming up in industry today. And I think, some businesses know that and they're sort of trying to check a box and say like, oh, we've got our purpose and values and we care about this, that, and the other. But if you don't feel the authenticity around it, I think especially in the younger people that are, craving connection in so many different ways. And it's so easy at home if you live alone to have zero connection that's human. Right. And so work is an opportunity to be a community where you get to be around people and be inspired by people and use your brain and get creative and, all the things. And I think that, for us, this is so true. It sounds like it's just something people say, but like our people are truly our biggest differentiator, right? Like, people will be new to Standard Meat and they'll be like, oh, one of our customers wants to bring a competitor through the plant, but I told him they couldn't do that. And I was like, no, who cares? Bring them through the plant. And they'll be like, well, aren't you worried that they're going to take all of our IP? And I'm like, no, because they can buy all the equipment, but they don't have the people to do it the way we do it. Plus, as our competitors get better, we get better. I think that, when we first stepped in and we were first talking about conscious capitalism, just a few years ago, Ben and I maybe couldn't show the data that the ROI is there.
Yeah.
But now that we're 6 years in and we've seen the growth that we've seen and the incredible just like success on paper and financial dollars, can I tell you it's a direct correlation to our people and what we do? I mean, yeah, but some people are not going to believe it and some people are. I know it's true. Ben knows it's true. Because we look at all these people every day and we're like, why do they show up and want to be here like this, right? Like they're incredible, but they're not owners. Everyone shows up like they're an owner of this business. It's incredible. Man, I just don't think you can fake that. And I don't think you can be successful and make really good money. Or maybe you can, it just doesn't feel as good.
Yeah. So I want to open up another angle on this, Ashli. So what does it mean to be a conscious business in the meat space, right? As you know, there's a lot of a lot of people are starting to move away from meat, at least to some degree. There's also the issue around the treatment of animals in the factory farming system, the inhumane treatment, the whole global animal partnership that Whole Foods started. And then there's a sustainability angle on it. So what are some of the things that Standard Meat is doing in regard to those things? And do you envision a future in which a plant-based protein, because you're defining it in terms of protein, not meat necessarily, that you could also have plant-based protein in your future and there might be some mix of those things?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is one luxury of how we're set up, that we're not a vertical company, that we don't raise any of our animals or, any of our ingredients for that matter. I think that allows us to be really flexible depending on what our customers need, right? And I remember the first time I went to the CEO Summit and meeting John Mackey and being scared that he'd be judgmental of who we are, right? Which was ridiculous. We ended up talking about Yellowstone instead for an hour. But we were really uncomfortable with the fact that we aren't, buying only regenerative farmed proteins and we're not only buying grass fed, but we are buying some of those things too, right? Some of our customers, it's super important to them that we source a certain way. And so we source that to their requirements. Regardless of who we buy from, we want to make sure that they are putting all of these things at the forefront as important to them, right? Thinking animal welfare is incredibly important to us, especially as just, being meat scientist and that being all ag-based. The love for the animal side and the care that goes into raising animals is taken very, very seriously by most in our industry. I think it's a misconception. A lot of people don't really quite realize what goes into the raising process and how seriously the industry takes it, right? It's easy to just talk about the terrible factory farms that are out there because of course those exist. But there are a lot of people in this industry that care very, very much about animal welfare, about, diets that are going to produce a protein that are going to be really, really healthy for humans. Animal protein is the cleanest label the most highly efficient source of protein for humans to eat, right? So be it red meat, fish, chicken, if you go buy a plant-based protein today that's sort of masquerading as a chicken or a beef, the label is there's 15 ingredients on there. Right. And a lot of the ingredients are soy and corn oil and things that animals eat to be able to produce the amino acids that we need in our diets, right? And so I think there's just a lot of misconception around animal-based proteins. With that said, I think there is 100% room for everything to exist. And I think as we grow as a human race, we're going to need every type of food source that we can get our hands on, right? And we need to be super thoughtful about what any food production means for the environment, right? And carbon emissions. And, I think animals present such an amazing opportunity there because just the natural state of how they move through fields and push carbon into the ground and really create a cleaner environment is one of the best ways we can probably manage through some of this rather than building, huge facilities that produce fake meat out of things that are not animal protein. And today we're still huge believers in chicken and beef and pork. With that said, we've invested in an alternative protein company that was making a chicken piece, or it looked like chicken, but was all plant-based, and it was delicious. And it was one of the million that came out during COVID, and it did not succeed, unfortunately. But someone will, right? And that is great. And if we can help them process it, we would be very open to it, right? And I think there's also room for, blending veggies, really like great like mushrooms and things that have wonderful health benefits in with red meat or in with chicken to just change the percentage of animal-based proteins we eat a day. I mean, there's so much opportunity out there to be environmentally thoughtful, to still be doing what's best for the health of humans, and be a meat company that's not only sourcing GAP proteins, right? Like, I wish every customer of mine wanted to have the highest level, right? But they can't all do that. And they serve a human in America that can't afford to eat expensive food. And so if we can make the best version of protein for them that can be an easy way for someone to eat at an Arby's, then I'm proud to be selling that product too.
Well put, Ashli. Well put.
I hope so.
Put.
I'm not an expert in any of that. So I apologize to the scientists out there when I might have said wrong.
So, Ashli, we like to end. I mean, this has been fun already, but we like to end with some fun rapid-fire questions. Is there a morning routine that you have that's sort of a must-have way to start your day?
What I really like to do is get up early and do some kind of exercise, right? It puts me in a better place all day, every day. I'm not really a morning person, so I don't like waking up super early. And I do still have young kids to sort of manage through. So I like to at least get that part in, but I usually have to find somewhere else in the day to sort of feed the other parts of me. Today, it's pretty much like get up, get a workout in, get dressed as fast as you can, and get the kids to school.
Is there a book or books that have shaped you in your leadership journey or even in life?
Well, I love reading. Love reading. I always have a ridiculous stack of books on my bedside table. I probably couldn't even tell you the name of half of them. One of the books I really have been enjoying that I just finished reading was a book called Loving Kindness.
Sharon Salzberg?
Yeah, it's just such a beautiful book. I'm working with a new coach his name is Jerry Colonna. And I fell in love with him at the CEO Summit when he was speaking on stage. And so his book, Reboot, has been really helpful for me as well in the past year. But there's so many, right? Like Unreasonable Hospitality is a book that I take really seriously in business. I think that Standard Meat is, we love the idea of you can't, and I don't remember who said this, but maybe Maya Angelou, people will never remember what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And that's such an important part of who Standard Meat is. And I think Unreasonable Hospitality tells that story in a way that's very, very tangible for our team to digest. So that's been one that's been huge. And then, of course, the Conscious Capitalism book, and the field guide, those things that inspired us to keep going and learn more about how we can be just better at what we already do, right? There's so many good books out there.
Thank you for the plug.
I am not even lying. I'm not lying. It's just easy. They're tangible, right? There's so many books out there that I'll try to read and I'm like, I don't have any idea what they're talking about here, right? But y'all's books have made it where I can really figure out how to execute some of that stuff. So thank you for that.
Okay, we finally got the Texan in you to say y'all.
Yeah, I know. It comes out every once in a while. It's many years of trying to be sound a little less Texan.
Well, the Fort Worthian side of her. There we go.
That's right.
Something you believed at 30 that you no longer believe.
That I was dumb.
Enough said on that. And then lastly, what if you could have dinner with anybody from history, conscious leader, or just a great human, who would that be?
Without putting a ton of thought into it, you mentioned Herb Kelleher earlier from Southwest. I think he would be super fascinating person to eat dinner with and understand how his model worked as beautifully as it did.
I have to say I'm blessed I got to have dinner with her.
Oh, jealous.
Along with John Mackey and Kip Tyndall. Were you there, Timothy?
No, I wasn't.
Roy Spence, I think, set it up. So yeah, he's as advertised, every bit. He would be puffing a cigarette with one hand, drinking his wild turkey with the other while chewing on a piece of food.
Yeah, it was probably a big steak too, right?
Well, thank you so much, Ashli. This has been delightful. I think you should, once this comes out, watch it with your daughter and your son.
Oh, thank you.
Okay? Because
that's
they
a
will
great
learn
idea.
about mom. Okay, and they'll learn things and they'll get inspired on their own journey as well. So,
thank you guys. I'm so honored that you guys asked me to be here. It's really special. And it was so much fun talking to y'all.
It's been great to have you all on the show. And I want to thank you and all of our listeners for listening. And if you enjoyed today's show on whatever channel you've been listening to, please hit the subscribe button. And if you feel so moved, go over to Apple and iTunes and leave us a review and a score. We'd love that. And a big thank you to Rainbow Productions for helping us produce this, and to Conscious Capitalism, Inc., who supports and helps us get this show out to you. And thank you all, and we'll see you next week.